When my oldest daughter was about 4 years old, I told her the story of a guru who was sitting with his disciples. And a person walked up and said that the world's 100% good. And the guru agreed. A second person walked up, said the world was 50% good and 50% bad. And the guru agreed. A third person walked up, and of course, as you can guess, he said the world was 100% bad. And the guru agreed. Well, after this third person, the disciples were confused. They felt maybe the guru was just placating people, telling them what they wanted to hear. And when they asked him, of course, he shared the truth of perception, that each man sees the world that he wants to see, that he chooses to see. At that point, my daughter said, "Well, Daddy, I believe the world's 100% good." And I said, "I agree, Tara." Well, a year later, 9/11 happened. And while she was at school, while it happened, I knew it would be a very, it was going to be a life-changing event for all Americans. And so I wanted to define for her how to frame it before anyone else did. So when she came home, I told her the story about someone had made a bad decision and a group of people, and they decided to fly some planes into buildings and kill and hurt a lot of people. And then I proceeded to tell her the story about the guru once again. And she said to me, heartbreakingly actually, but she said to me, "Daddy, I believe the world's 50% good, 50% bad." And I told her, "I know it's tempting to believe that in these moments, Tara, but the world's 100% good." Now, I've told this story dozens of times. And if I'm sharing it with a live crowd, I always get some objection. I always get some perception of truth come out on the floor. And I see that obviously there was a lot of suffering that happened as a result of 9/11. If we take the 5,000 or so people that seem to be directly either murdered or injured, maybe 10,000, whatever the number is, and we multiply them by 20 for the immediate circle that was affected by that, we're still under 250,000 people. And what I witnessed that following week was an America we all only dreamed about. Everybody was cooperating. Everybody was holding doors open for each other. People were patient with people in traffic. It was a magical time. So much money was given. It took them 2.5 years to process the checks. So much blood was given that they ended up having to throw the blood out because it went bad. Even if it was just for a few hours or a few days or a few weeks, there were people who had a sense of purpose who had never had one before and likely haven't had one of the same caliber since. Now, I don't want to get into some type of comparative math. That's not the idea. The idea is that we choose to see what we see in front of us. I see my suffering as my grace. I see my suffering as the grindstone to help sharpen my self-awareness and self-knowledge. Of course, I have compassion and empathy for other people's suffering. I'm watching this very moving documentary on Netflix about World War II where they've colorized everything and they're giving first-person perspectives, and it is a very immersive type of show. And it's hard not to feel the amazing amount of suffering I'm watching it in a little tiny TV show, and to think about what people were really experiencing and going through, to understand what's happening in the world right now, and pretty much always has been in some part of the world where there's either been genocide, war, some type of suffering, pain inflicted. And when you see all of this, it's very easy to get very pessimistic, understandably so. And of course, it's difficult to be optimistic in it. So I have to ask myself, what is the purpose of suffering? What is the purpose of this pain? What is it that I'm supposed to do with it? Because it's everywhere I look, and I can choose to feel it almost any time I want. And if I believe in an afterlife, some days I'm atheist, some days I'm agnostic, some days I'm a true believer. And as I think about the different positions, or I think about what this life means from those different perspectives, if I believe in an afterlife, then I would have to assume that I chose to come feel this pain. This pain's here for a reason. Is it the experience of the pain alone? Is it that as a spirit or soul that I'm boundless and full of joy and can't feel pain without coming to this existence? As a lot of you know, I spent the last 2 or 3 years sort of submarining and going down. I took an opportunity in my life that, of course, would have an element of suffering, loss, and depression. I was able to prepare for it. And when the event occurred, I was able to allow myself to take these tools of self-awareness that I've learned and developed over the last 3 decades and go into this darkness and see it from a different perspective. And I'll tell you, it's our suffering and our pain that truly is our grace. It reminds us of who we truly are. If you think about it, it's one thing all humans have in common. We all suffer at some level, at some time, to some degree. And so, for me, this past 2 or 3 years was transformative. It was the suffering. The best analogy I have is a cocoon of suffering that allowed me to transform who I am. Now, I've come out of it not only a different person, but more empathetic and have a deeper sense of feeling for other people as they go through their suffering. My want to help is increased by tenfold, at least. My ability to help has increased even significantly more. It's through embracing my suffering. It's through using my suffering as a reflection to be able to see the worst parts of myself. At least personally, this is how I got to use it. Because my suffering forced me into subconscious behavior patterns, old ones, really very archaic childhood ones. And I hadn't gotten to really take a good look at those. I thought I had beat anger. I didn't beat it. I was just managing it well. And as I went through this suffering, and I was, as we experience pain, we tend to fall back to as we tend to get more limbic and more emotional, we tend to fall back to that subconscious programming. And so I got to witness this, and I got to witness this anger that would come up, that these were people that were trying to help me, and I would get angry at them for what felt like a reason, but at my heart of hearts, I knew it was for no reason other than habit. That's just one slice of what I got to see about myself by using suffering as fuel for the fire of transformation. And I'm excited for the next 4 or 5 years for myself. I have a very, very clear idea of who I am and what I can contribute, what I've been asked to steward and be responsible for. And I wouldn't have this without suffering. So I know that a lot of you who watch my material are in your 20s and early 30s. And I know that it may seem like there's not a whole lot of reason to plan a future, have a family, particularly if you're caught up in social media and the news and the constant bombardment of messaging that is so negative. So over this next year, I'm going to be having a regular session on Sundays where I talk about not so much suffering, but change, and the change of mind necessary to be able to see and appreciate what you have in front of you. We'll talk about techniques. We'll talk about philosophies. We'll have discussions about contextual understanding. But the idea is to embrace your life and experience it. The good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful. It really is all beautiful. But the transcendence necessary to get there is tricky. And this is what I hope to help you with. I'll close with a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I look forward to this next year together.